My role at American Farmland Trust sort of goes from working with a lot of researchers to providing technical assistance, but what I really love is to work with communities. And so this panel is really to take the brilliant work that we heard about this morning that Debbie and Becca and Mary talked about coming out of the research community and talking about how it sort of plays out on the ground in real places. So making the case for food systems investment, but it's really about real world stories. So I'm joined today by two Kansas farmers, a local lender, and somebody from Cooperative Extension in North Carolina. And Mary already made a pitch for the importance of having Extension embrace the idea of local food systems as part of the system. So Dara Bloom, who's here from North Carolina State, will be talking about that. And then Donna Pearson MacLeish is a farmer and founder of Common Ground Producers and Growers in Wichita, Kansas. And then she's sitting next to Dave Hill, who's the founder and president of Mid-America Bank. And if folks were at the dinner last night, you would have heard him speak, which is in Baldwin City, Kansas. And then Rosana Bellman is a farm operations manager at Bauman Cedar Valley Farms in Garnett, Kansas. And then Dara, of course, is the assistant professor and local foods extension specialist at North Carolina State University, specializing in food systems and local food. So what we're going to do with the panel today is take about 5 to 7 minutes for each of the panelists to tell you a little bit about who they are and what they do. And then we're going to have just kind of a pretty informal Q&A where I'm going to ask them some questions coming off of this morning's presentations, and they can kind of give that sort of real-world, down-to-earth response to whether what they heard this morning really resonated with them and it was meaningful to them in the work that they do. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Donna, and she's going to lead us off and tell a little bit about her story.
Good morning. I'm Donna Pearson MacLeish.
Do you want the...
Can you hear me okay? Okay. Good morning to all of you. Can you hear me? The green light is on. Keep speaking. There it is. Good morning again. I'm Donna Pearson MacLeish, founder and director of the Common Ground Community Mobile Market. And we're housed in Wichita, Kansas. And we are uniquely, as far as I know, the only mobile market in the area that does what we do. The purpose of our mobile market is to provide access to fresh produce and fruits and veggies to people that cannot access the market. And I'd like to introduce a person to you because the mobile market started with a question. We have a 40-acre family farm in urban Wichita, and we had a lot of produce, and my brothers asked me what we could do with the produce, and I said, well, let's start a farmer's market. And so we started on the ground farmer's market on site, and then the lady in the back with the pink camera, the pink phone that's taking a picture of me, her name is Janet Diggs. She's a senior coordinator at one of our senior sites. And she asked me a question. She said, Donna, can you bring produce to Shady Way? Because we have senior market vouchers, and they don't have transportation to use their vouchers. And I said, sure, without even thinking. Sure, we'll do a farmer's market. Yeah, I can do that. In 2014, we started with 11 sites. And after Janet, we visited Shady Way, then the Department of Aging said, we've got some more sites for you. And so this season, we're in our 5th season, and we're looking to serve 36 sites in Sedgwick, Harvey, and Butler counties. We take fresh produce to those that do not have access to fresh produce, and it is a joy. One of the wealth-building opportunities one of the speakers talked about was relationships. And each of our sites are a separate community within themselves. So we're building relationships. And they're looking forward to us. When we pull up, they're lined up for the mobile market, ready for us to serve them. We do seniors, we do high-rises, multi-income, diverse high-rises. We'll just go anywhere. This year we're adding a new site, which is the health department. So we'll be picking up WIC and SNAP with double up food bucks. So we're excited about that. I won't tell you that it's not a lot of work. My grandson and I started the delivery, and since we've grown, I've added intergenerational youth in our community to help me during the summer. So they're also learning farming techniques and the business side of farming, which is good. But our definition of wealth is being able to collaborate and to bring entities together to work together. And one of our other entities I would like to recognize is Rebecca McMahon. She's our K-State Extension right-hand person. She's my right-hand person. I've got several right-hand people, so, but we've got all of these, the entities networking together so that we can erase the division and fragmentation of services so we can get services to the people that need it. So our goal is to, we have a network of producers on this end that we provide income during the season. And they're community gardeners, they're seniors, anyone that wants to provide produce to the market, we distribute to the end customer, and everybody benefits. It's a win-win situation. So that's what the mobile market does. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Rosana Bellman, and I thought first I'm going to try to be quick here and tell you who I'm not and what we do and hopefully why we do it. First thing is I'm not a numbers person. My relationship with numbers and finance is, the best illustration I've seen was in a old Peanuts comic strip, and there's little Susie, Charlie Brown's sister, whatever her name, yeah, I think so. Anyways, and so she's like, you can't trust numbers because, like, here's a 3, or maybe it's a mountain, or maybe it's an E, or maybe it's a bird. So you just can't trust numbers. And that's kind of been my opinion of it. And so I do not pretend to like them, but because of that, I grew up in a family with 4 brothers, and we are competitive, and naturally, as being the one, I had a sister come along later, and so it was me and 4 brothers, and so I had to keep up with them. And so that's probably the only reason why I do the work with numbers that I do, is because it's either they beat you or you beat them. And so I wanted to win with the numbers. The other thing is, I'm not sure whether it's an intelligent thing or not to be on a panel with my banker. You know, I can't paint too rosy of a picture over here. Dave will call me out. So a short synopsis on my family. I farm with my family. That's my parents, 4 brothers and 1 sister. I fall the second oldest, so we're all first-generation farmers. We've been doing this for 16 years, and we're still every year a new beginning farmer. We didn't come from a family history of farming, so we started it when my parents were 40 with no money and 6 children, which was deemed very unintelligent. We still have all 6 children and all of our no money left at the end of 16 years. And we are only still here because, definitely not from any of our background in agriculture or because of our good financial standing when we started or anything like that, but only because we've survived. We've had a lot of help from family and neighbors and friends, a lot of community pitching in, and and we persevered, and there was miracles. So that take those away. We do. My family farms a variety of things as a result of everyone being involved in it. So we do have traditional row crops, and I say traditional, those are still non-GMO. We have also a feed mill where we process that for our own use and also for retail distribution. We grow just about every kind of animal, not quite. And also pasture-based. We process those in our USDA-inspected processing facilities. We have red meat and poultry. And we then direct market some of those ourselves through a mobile meat market. Had no knowledge of your mobile farmers market. That was also you'll probably hear about, that was one of our responses to the community food shed. I also do some work where we are very big, because of the help that we've received from others, we're very big on our farm about education. So we also manage or serve on the board with the Garnett Farmers Market, Slow Money, Kansas, and the Farmers Union here. I think that's most of what we do. I think I might be missing something, I'm not sure. But why we do it, chiefly, we're accidental farmers, and we didn't ever really, I kind of thought, when I was in grade school, I thought it'd be nice to be a nurse, and now I'm a enthusiastic butcher. So we never ended up with, so we never intended to be where we're at. It all happened by happenstance, and the main thing was our goals in life, and that was to preserve our land, to preserve our family, and the community impact of that. We don't see ourselves as setting out to change our community, and this is what I think our story can be really reflective of every other farmer's story there, because when we were asked about how we've impacted our community, we had to sit back and think, and it has been amazing what the impact of one family farm can be on a community. So we've seen a lot of other farmers change their production practices as a result. We have in the last 3 years, we've seen over 12,000 acres change to non-GMO production because of because we have the ability to direct market that. We do also do some export. We do some direct market and export of that. There's over 2,000 farmers that we butcher for. That has a ripple effect across Kansas and Missouri, some Oklahoma. And in the community, trying to measure all of that, I think would be really fascinating, and I think we have something later to say that. When we started our non-GMO feed mill 3 years ago, somebody mentioned that they thought it had the power to change the state, and we're like, wow, probably not. Maybe our community, but not the state. And we've seen the ripple effect of that in different other businesses opening up as a result of that keystone. And so I think we can say that, yeah, it has had a statewide impact in one degree or another, something that we wouldn't have believed. And even further, what amazes me is even now how we're having an impact across the world as a result of all these things on our farm. We've also partnered with some other family friends in Uganda to cross-market their coffee. And so we're using sustainable organic agriculture in 2 continents to both revitalize our own home communities and caffeinate Americans.
Next time I want to go in before you, Rosana, because you do such a great job. Great job. Well, it's great to be with you today. And I have to tell you this. I've never done an international transaction in my 36 years of banking until Rosana came along. So she couldn't believe it either. But she goes, "This is your first international deal?" He said, "Yes, this is the first."
So it had to be me.
Yeah. I think she was shocked, and I was more shocked than she was. Anyway, I'm Dave Hill with Mid-America Bank. I've been in the banking business for 36 years. My first 13 years were primarily in a traditional rural Kansas bank with heavy agricultural experience, if that makes sense. So probably 90% of what I did in that bank was work with agriculture. Thank you. So I did a lot of ag lending, particularly in 1985. 85. I went to Norton, Kansas, and I became very familiar with what we called FMHA, which is now FSA. And basically, when I walked in, I was pretty much told, here's your list of customers, get them improved or get them sold out, one way or the other, because the ag economy was so bad at that time. And one of the tributes that I really am proud of is that we didn't sell anybody out. We were able to work everything out, and I'll tell you, that's because we had a great FSA office to work with. So FSA, even today, we're still using FSA extensively. So bottom line, in the 80s, when ag was really tough, interest rates were really high, we were very involved with FSA, and they saved a lot of family farms. And it's so good for me to go back to Norton and see those same people and see them still operating, or the next generation operating. So that's the most gratifying thing, you might say, in our business. But anyway, about 25 years ago, came back here, started a bank from ground zero. Our main emphasis is in real estate lending. 92% of our loan portfolio is real estate, so that's our specialty. And we are actually the #1 real estate lender in Douglas County right now. We do about 70 loans a month of all different types. 50% of our business is in Douglas County, 25% in Johnson County, and 25% in other counties, if that makes sense. So again, when I tell you we're 92% real estate, that doesn't leave much else, right? And we are about a $175 million bank from startup to 175 in the last 23 years. And in addition to that, we service a lot of house loans, probably another $300 million worth of house loans. So we're pretty big in real estate. And how, Marlon Bates, it's kind of Marlon's fault that I'm here today, because he kept asking and for me to participate, and I said, well, Marlon, we're really not traditional ag lenders. And, but then I started thinking about it, and we do have 4 or 5 people that are non-traditional farmers that we do finance. We just don't do it in a traditional way. Back in the day when I was really doing traditional lending, we would set up a line of credit, secure it with crops or something of that sort. At the end of the season, you'd get paid back and you'd start all over again, do it year after year. Well, we don't really do that in our non-traditional farming matter today. And what we're looking for in this type of a customer is, we're wanting somebody that really knows what they're doing. We want them to come in with a good business plan. Time, everything's about time, and one other thing we don't like to do is we don't like to make size the emphasis of the importance of anybody's account. So like our average real estate loan is $175,000. Our average non-traditional farmer is probably anywhere from $10,000 to maybe $50,000 from an operating standpoint. So pretty small, I guess you'd say. But what we find as a community bank, which is definitely what we are, we're a community bank that likes to take care of its customers in the community in a 30-mile radius. We try to say, we have 3 locations right now, Lawrence, Baldwin, Wellsville, and in another year we'll be in Gardner. So those are the 4 locations that we'll be operating out of with in a 30-mile radius, you might say. So we think that's our community, and we think we should serve our community. So when our customers come in and they have needs, then we try to figure out ways to take care of their needs, so to speak. So, again, we're not doing traditional ag finance on non-traditional farmers, but yes, if you've got real estate or equipment or automobiles and you want to secure a line of credit, we'll certainly do that. And it's kind of a fun part of our business too. A little diversification is good for the mind, So, when you do 70 house loans a month, or it's nice to have some producer walk in that is working really hard. These people are hardworking people, and it's just really good to hear their story, and it's fun to hear them talk about 8 out of 12 of our crops were really successful, the other 4 weren't. It's just like traditional farming, so it's kind of interesting. Anyway, that's my background, and I'll be glad to answer any questions down the road if you guys have any. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Dara Bloom. I'm an local foods extension specialist at North Carolina State University. And I feel like we've talked a lot about, or people have mentioned extension a lot all morning, and I just want, like a show of hands, how many of you are familiar with what extension is? Okay, so it is the majority of people in the room. I wasn't sure if it would make sense to just sort of start off by explaining a little bit about, I feel like I need to explain a little bit about extension in North Carolina and local foods in North Carolina before I can kind of even start to talk a little bit about my role, and I realize we're kind of coming to a different scale over here, but in North Carolina, extension, it includes 2 universities, NC State and NC State University, which is our historically black land-grant university. And so we have researchers and specialists like myself who operate at the state level. And then we still have county offices, which I know not every state has, but we have offices in each of our 100 counties and the Eastern Band of Cherokees. And so in those offices, we'll have a different kind of array of extension agents depending on community priorities, but we'll have sort of our traditional agriculture agents, horticulture, 4-H, family and consumer sciences. So my role is to work at the state level and to create training and resources and programs for our folks at the county level. And so in North Carolina, I wanted to say too, we have, so our extension, in 2012, we decided that local food would be our flagship program. Our flagship program manager, Joanna Lalikas, who's a very close colleague of mine, was hired in 2013. And then I was hired later on in 2013, kind of right after her. So we kind of came in at the same time. And I think it sounds really easy to say, like, oh, we have local food, it's a flagship program. And a big part of what Joanna and I have spent the past 4 years doing is figuring out, like, what does that mean and what does it mean for our agents? But I also want to make sure that it doesn't sound like that just kind of happened out of nowhere. There's a really, and I'm the only person I think at NC State at the specialist level with local food as part of my title, but the work in local food systems has been going on within NC State and within North Carolina for probably about 25 years. So between NC State and NC A&T State University, and it's actually a partnership with our Department of Agriculture, we have the Center for Environmental Farming Systems, which we call CEFS. So CEFS started off 25 years ago. I think actually next year is our 25th anniversary, with a 2,000-acre research farm doing research, long-term research on sustainable agricultural systems. As CEFS grew over the years, they realized that they couldn't only do the on-farm part of it because they were doing things like studying pasture-raised pork, and they knew that were developing sustainable growing practices. There was consumer demand, but that infrastructure between the two is missing. And so CEFS started to move into community-based food systems infrastructure, and supply chains. And so that legacy really of CEFS working on those issues within these two universities and within Extension for 25 years really helped lay the groundwork for thinking about local food within Extension. At the same time, North Carolina, we have Mary mentioned Scott Marlowe, who used to be the executive director of RAFI, the Rural Advancement Foundation International. They have been doing work in sustainable agriculture for, I'm not sure how many years in North Carolina, but many, many years. There's also the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association, the Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project in the western part of the state. So we have a lot of nonprofits working in this area. And then I think it's also worth mentioning a couple of things. One, we were a big tobacco state, so we had the tobacco buyout. And when that happened, we had a lot of finances come into the state, which we invested into foundations. And those foundations, their role was to help farmers transition away from tobacco. And that was happening sort of right at the same time as local food was starting to become popular. The other thing about North Carolina, which I'm not sure how much it mirrors other states, but you know, we have really rapidly urbanizing areas. So the triangle where I live is Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill. We have some of the fastest rates of growth of people moving into the state from other states. Charlotte is also a really fast-growing area. So we have people who are urban coming into these areas, coming from other parts, really high demand for local food. We had the tobacco money that helped to fund a lot of local food infrastructure. So food hubs we mentioned earlier, helping to have ways to transition farmers away from tobacco. And a lot of that money went into community development around local food. So I think Extension, kind of given that landscape of what local food looks like in North Carolina, I think for us in Extension, it's partly like, oh my gosh, this is like a moment where people are actually excited and interested about food. We have consumer demand, interest in local food, and we see it as a big educational opportunity. And I think that's always what we in Extension have done the best is educate people. I think also Becca mentioned that rural-urban divide, and you know, like I mentioned, North Carolina. I mean, you look at our electoral map from 2016, you know, and we're a couple of blue dots in a very red state, and I think that probably is similar across the country. So thinking about how do we use local food as a way to strengthen those rural-urban divide, to really think about educating people about where their food comes from. And so my role, as I mentioned, is to try to create some of those resources and trainings and programs to help our extension agents. You know, I think that, you know, when we talk about, I think the panel is supposed to be, you know, what's happening in the field. For me, it's about bridging between the research and what we know at the university with how we support our extension agents in the field. Because it is a different model for extension. I think in extension, we're used to being like, we're the experts, we're here to help, we have all the answers. And as I think you've been hearing, like, there's no single right answer in local food, right? It's about the community, it's about the context, it's about building community capacity. And so I think Extension's role in that way really needs to be as facilitators. And so we've developed a lot, Joanna and I have worked really closely to develop sort of a consistent curriculum in not just local food, but we kind of took a step back and said to understand local food, you have to understand the food system more generally and think about this whole systems perspective. So we have a curriculum that talks about the food system, local food, what the research is behind local food, and we've used that in a lot of different ways in training extension agents. It's been incorporated into an online local food course that's non-credit professional development that we're just launching. It's been incorporated into our Extension Master Food Volunteer program, which I'll be talking more about this afternoon. Actually, our Family and Consumer Science High School Foods and Nutrition 2 classes just adopted this curriculum, and we'll be teaching it this year. So that's our first role, is really that educational piece of it, and then trying to do kind of one-on-one technical assistance with our agents to think about how to build their capacity to do some of this community facilitation and help communities decide how to address local foods in their counties.
Terrific, and I think we're on time, which is really awesome as well. So many of you kind of touched on my first question, but I'm going to ask it again because one of the things that Debbie sort of kicked us off with this morning was this sort of a national trend towards people wanting more transparency and more relationship between themselves and the food system, or really between themselves and the farmers and ranchers who grow our food. So I'm wondering if, from a much more field perspective, if you, the panelists, have noticed that same trend for transparency and relationship. And if so, how have you addressed it? And you can take it in any order and just pass the mic around, whoever feels inspired, and nobody has to speak if they don't want to.
Well, the question was noticing the transparency. One thing that really we spent a couple of years kind of, or I did, mulling over this question is, there was, local food demand, but at the same time, when I was in the Triangle in North Carolina, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, people were asking me, they're like, man, the farmers markets are overcrowded. Are you noticing the same thing? Like farmers markets must not be the thing anymore. And then I talked to some friends in Thailand who were doing some really innovative farming methods, like super intensive farming, organic farming in a very small area in urban areas. And then they were telling me, oh my, we have all these farmers ready and seeing the benefits of raising food in small areas and intensely and very good for their soil and everything, but they said we cannot sell organic tomatoes. They said nobody will buy them because they don't like the taste. Now that's completely opposite maybe of Americans' perception of tomatoes, but in Thailand, that was the issue there. And so we're hearing one thing, and then we're seeing, and sometimes we have the farmers who are committed and having this gap between that and the markets. And so I mulled over it for a couple of years, and we fought with it ourselves. And really, we kept coming back again and again. The connect between the two is the consumer education. And so we were like, well, somebody needs to be doing a better job of educating these consumers then. And we kind of got aggravated at some of our wholesale customers and our grocery stores because they were not educating consumers on, the difference between, in the greenwashing, the difference between a farmer who's really trying to do it right and someone who's just using some glitzy advertising and pretty pictures of cows and grass, and maybe they don't see either one. So we grew frustrated, and then we realized that, that's because it's supposed to be our job. If we're concerned about consumer education, and if we have ways that we want to raise stuff, we need to be responsible for educating the consumers ourselves. That brought about a fundamental shift in the way our farm did business, and we've been much more happier and feeling like we're fulfilling our farm and family mission since then, and focusing on the consumers. And a big part of that, that brought about a change and a more emphasis on direct-to-consumer retailing. That's where our mobile meat market was born. But additionally, it's not just selling it direct-to-consumer and being able to see that consumer face-to-face. That's where I think, Becca, we are seeing the unprofitability of direct-to-consumer, even though we're educating them and they might be very intelligent consumers. And I think a lot of that, the missing piece in there is that we weren't speaking the consumer's language, because why bees matter to a farmer and why bees matter to a consumer are two different things. And so if I'm just telling them why bees matter to me, and it doesn't really mean anything to them, and why water conservation matters to a farmer and why water conservation matters to a consumer are two different things. And I think that's maybe the missing link between the direct-to-consumer profitability, but also what we've seen about the transparency. It's there, but the links are problematic.
Thanks. Yeah, and I think, so it was interesting, I think, Debbie, when you mentioned transparency this morning, it was partly in the context of sort of trust, and especially millennials, trust in the authenticity of specific businesses. And for us, I think we've really tried to approach it. We've thought very carefully about how we frame local food systems. I think we see our role in Extension has always been to connect research to outreach and to really talk about what the evidence base is. And so for us, we've been really careful because, again, as Debbie mentioned, the USDA doesn't define, let alone regulate, what local food is. And so if there's no definition of what local food is, there is no guarantee that turning to local food will have the outcomes that your communities want them to have. I think it goes back to what Becca was saying about really understanding what are your communities trying to achieve. And so we take two-pronged approach for this. One is we really try to educate people about what we do know about the impacts about local food. So, drawing really heavily on Becca's research and on economic impacts, but also talking about, what are the environmental health, what do we know about the research behind those impacts. And part of the reason we do that is because we feel really strongly that, for example, I think especially early on with local food, people would say, oh, it travels less food miles, and therefore it's going to be better for the environment. And the research shows that that's actually not true. That's really more about efficiency rather than distance. And so we just want to make sure that when, we're not trying to promote local food on a basis that can't be held up by research, and then because we don't want a consumer who is buying it because of their food miles, and then they find out that's not true, and then they feel like they've been duped somehow. So we want to be really clear about what we do know about the impacts, but like I said, also if we also know that there isn't any one single definition and therefore impacts can really be variable, we really want to try to understand, really try to get our extension agents to think about and understand what do consumers expect and what do their communities expect. Or that those outcomes will be, so that we can work with communities, because you can, if environmental impacts or health impacts or food access, if that's what your community is prioritizing about local food, then we can build projects around those outcomes and those impacts. We can create local food projects that will have those outcomes, but we don't want to just say it's sort of like have a blanket example of, local food will always be better for the environment or always healthier. And I think also the other piece of that is that it is really place-based and it is really community-specific. So in North Carolina, we have some communities where, the entire county is basically dependent on Purdue for, in chicken, processing. And so in that county, Purdue chicken might count as local food for that community. It's a really big employer, and that really means a lot to people in that county. And so, an agent needs to understand that working with that community might include, talking about Purdue chicken. I live in the Triangle in Durham. No. You tell a hipster consumer that Purdue chicken is local food because it's been grown and processed in North Carolina, and that to them feels very inauthentic. Doesn't meet what their expectations and their values are around local food. So I think it's really trying to take that community-based approach and talking about transparency and talking really honestly about what we know about the research and the impacts are, and then really trying to understand what communities value so that we can meet their expectations.
Because I work closely with our producers and growers, we are committed to no herbicides and no pesticides in our growing processes. We have a lot of weeds. But our commitment is to be as close to organic as possible. The other thing is the relationship with our customers is important because they will invariably ask, where does this food come from? And when we pull up in our truck to set up, they always want to know, where did this come from? And I can honestly, truthfully tell them, it is locally grown. I know the producers because I have a relationship with the producers and growers and the community garden people that grow the food. And this food is food that I eat myself, and I am bringing it to you because it's healthy. So transparency is answering those questions and building relationships with your customers. And also transparency is doing what you say you're going to do, have the produce that you say you're going to have, and it be what you say it's going to be. The other thing is we have to have transparency with the community around the food desert and food insecurity areas. So when I work with the senior coordinators and I work with K-State Extension and I work with the people that collaborate with us, we also have to have transparency among those collaborators. So truth, honesty, integrity is very important, and our customers value the fact that when the mobile market pulls up, we have what's locally grown, what's available at the time, and it's available to our customers.
You're gonna, okay, good. All right, so thank you very much. And I think those are very interesting perspective and a very diverse perspective on what some of the data was showing this morning, and it gives some texture to it that I think is really important. So my next question builds a little bit more off of what Becca and Mary were talking about, which is sort of, you know, what is wealth and what are the different kinds of wealth? And so how do you feel like your work advances community wealth and well-being? How does it support the local economy? But beyond the local economy, you know, the other kinds of capital that people talked about, social capital and relationships, or natural capital and taking advantage of the natural amenities, those kinds of things.
Well, I'll start. When we had our conference call, my question was, what does wealth mean? What wealth means different things to different people. In our communities, wealth can be social well-being, healthy, mental well-being. When we're generating community wealth, I feel that we are empowering our customers to eat healthy. Healthy eating provides well-being, and it contributes to a higher quality of life. To me, that's the basis for wealth. Anything after that is an added. What we've noticed with our seniors and our customers is that their self-worth and well-being is enhanced because they are not only recognized at the market, but they're validated at the market. This is our 5th season, so some of these people have been with us for almost 5 years. So when they see you in the grocery store, it's really funny when they see me in the grocery store, I'm dressed probably like this. When I'm on the mobile market, I'm dressed just a little bit differently. And they'll walk past me and kind of look like, I know your face. And I just smile and I say, hello, how are you? And then I'll eventually tell them, I'm the vegetable lady. That's what they call me, I'm the vegetable lady. Oh, okay. But it's being validated wherever you are. It's knowing that the person that is providing services to you not only provides service to you at your point of contact, but anywhere you are, anywhere I see you, I'm validating your self-worth. They look better, they feel better, they think clearer, and they learn that they have options. Our customers, we talk at the mobile market. They talk a lot. And a lot of times we set up in the community rooms for the seniors because of the weather. It's either too hot or if it's raining. So we take the produce into their senior center, their community center, where they gather and they buy their produce and they sit and talk to us about their farming life, their children, how they are, how they're feeling, and all of that is building relationships, and that helps with their well-being. We've seen some we've had some fantastic stories come out of this mobile market, and it's been a privilege to be able to serve this clientele and see the growth that they have. And these relationships have become stepping stones. We've seen children raised up, and my grandson started out with me. He graduated this year, and I thought, oh, there goes part of my help. And he said, they call me Nan, Nan, how about if I stay one more summer to help you at the market? And I shouted. Because that's important, because he has the capability of training the new youth that are coming in with us. So we're really excited about our youth that work with us also. But it's about a sense of well-being. We're building wealth when we're building people.
I might touch that one. Okay, yeah. In terms of wealth, obviously most of my experience would be in financial wealth. And of course, I'm always interested in building our community financially. If you let outsiders take all your capital out or all your earnings out, it's really hard to grow your community. Like I heard somebody, I won't mention the county, but I heard somebody say last night that 80% of their land in their county was owned by outside people. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's really bothersome. So, you know, anytime that we do a project, a lot of real estate, we really have a significant interest if it's locally done, because then we know that it'll be done and people still living here, you know, doing hopefully a good job, so because of the pride factor, but also the future profits and the future wealth that comes out of that stays in your community. You know, if we as a community of, say, Baldwin, let everybody from Johnson County come in and develop our community and take the wealth out, it's kind of hard to grow our community capital, so to speak. And we're all the time asking people to donate for this and donate for that to support these different missions. Well, the first thing you have to do is create some financial wealth so that people can do more than just pay bills, you know. So, yeah, we're very interested, and it happens everywhere. I mean, even in Lawrence, Kansas, with all these apartment complexes that are going up, I don't really think all of them are locally owned. I think a lot of this money goes to California and Arkansas, and I just think it's something we should all be aware of, as where is your money going, or where is your wealth being built, so to speak. Anyway, so something very much of interest to me. And I really attribute that back to the local farmers. I mean, keeping the food in our community, keeping that wealth in our community, that is wealth, to have all that food production in our communities. It's job creation, it's food creation, and just better quality of life overall. So it's exciting to see everybody here have an interest in that. Thank you.
Thanks. I think one of the reasons that we feel like Extension is so well positioned to work in local foods is because we have expertise at the campus level and with our agents in the counties along sort of every step of the supply chain. So we have agricultural agents who's traditionally work with farmers, and they're providing training to new and beginning farmers. They're providing training to farmers, as I mentioned, transitioning out of tobacco, entering new markets, about diversifying their markets, about local food markets. So we've got that step of the supply chain, but we also have agents who work with community gardens and with school gardens, really trying to build those relationships that we talked about, that social capital, and really working with youth and the educational piece of it. We also have 4-H, which again really works with youth and tries to help them to really feel integrated into food and farming systems. And finally, family and consumer science agents who work with consumers around that educational piece, so we can get local food all the way through the supply chain, but we want to make sure people know how to use it. There's all that interest in canning again, things just kind of come back around. So we have, just at every step of the supply chain, this opportunity to engage people around what local food is, and how it can be a part of the community and really build sort of those different, social capital, build capital around infrastructure, looking at the natural environment. So I think that, for us in Extension, we feel like we have the opportunity to really help communities, see every piece of that. For us too, I think, at least for me personally, my favorite projects are the ones that engage all of our Extension agents. So for example, we have a project called Farm to Early Care and Education, which is a fancy way of saying farm to preschool or farm to childcare. And that's really, it's about both bringing in local food for meals and snacks, but then there's also the way that we're doing it, a gardening component. So there's that hands-on sort of kids in the garden, because it's just the cutest thing in the world. And then kind of that educational piece for them too about food and farming. And then it's also working with, the kitchens and the staff and trying to help them think about health and food and local food and how to prepare it. And so for us, it's something that, our, Extension, we can support every step of that. We can have agriculture agents helping to connect to local farmers, which is actually the piece that I'm helping to work on, and we're not quite sure yet if it's going to be profitable, but we're working on different models to see how we can make it profitable. What we've seen so far is we've got farmers who really are passionate about it and passionate about the educational piece, and that seems really important. But we can also bring in our horticulture agents or maybe our junior master gardeners and our 4-H to work with gardens at the child care centers, and we can have family providing consumer science agents who do that hands-on nutrition education with kids, as well as training for cooks to know how to process local food. So I think really trying to think about, and child care centers can be sort of an anchor institution in a community where you can have parents also then have that spillover effect where they're learning about local food and healthy eating, and it's really creating community around this one space, really built around local food.
Okay, I'm going to be quick because I know lunch is the next thing. But I wanted to speak towards wealth as community and economic development. Dave mentioned that, Kansas is an agricultural state, and I know in our county that that accounts for at least 90% of the economy. But when we're talking economic development, that's not what we think of. We have an ethanol plant in our county, which may be, billions of dollars. It required extra water plant, and maybe 5 new jobs. And I got to thinking about jobs and economic development when I was in Walmart the other day, and they have a really good way to send money internationally, by the way. That's the best thing I can say about Walmart. and it pains me to say it. But I noticed there's nice, huge, they have new promotional signage all over. And so right behind the self-checkout robots, investing in American jobs, right? I thought that, it made me laugh for the rest of the day. I'm serious. And so, so we're talking about jobs. And this made me think there was also another, specifically in this area, we had a large processor move into town, not Purdue, but, there was the big promotion of the jobs that's available when you have new economic development coming into your community. I don't know. People here could probably say, what is 1,600 jobs? Right? 1,600 jobs. Okay, so I wondered, I'm a processor, much, much smaller, and I wondered how many jobs I'm responsible for. So directly, ethanol plant has 5 maybe. I'm many less millions and billions, but I would have 30 people on my payroll. 15 of those would be full-time. But that's not my job impact, right? That's not how Tyson calculated their 1,600 jobs. So I tried to calculate, I have 2,000 people that I service, and how many of those people are responsible for other jobs, and if I would not be here, or if, as another similar community infrastructure and processing facility would not be there, how many of those jobs would go away? And with my quick and rough calculations, I came up with between 525 and 600 jobs. And that's without redoing my community's water systems or roads or anything. So that's another way, back to what Becca was saying, to think about community wealth. It's already there. It just needs nurtured a little.
So that's great, and I love that you started out by saying you're not a numbers person. I have a ton more questions, but I know that you all have questions too, and as Rosana said, we are getting close to lunch, and so I think I'd like to open it up, and Helen is going to be wonderful and take the mic to people, but it's really your chance now to ask either individual panelists or the panelists as a group any question you would like. Otherwise, I'll start asking more questions.
I'm Rosa Lee from Summerfield, and I work with economic development there in our very small town. And I was wondering, what crops did your farmers choose after they couldn't grow tobacco anymore?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've seen a lot of farmers, who are moving out of tobacco, turn to specialty crops, and turn to produce, which is again why I think extension has been really involved. So for example, we have a food hub that was started in the western part of the state, just north of Asheville, and they're providing a lot of technical assistance and training. It's handling vegetable crops is very different than tobacco. But I think a lot of our farmers saw that opportunity because there were local food markets and there was consumer demand to do products, to do fresh vegetables, to move into that space. But it's required training and certification around good agricultural practices, food safety, if they want to be selling to schools. Our school districts require that in North Carolina. but some of the supermarkets do too. It's required kind of having that intermediary, that food hub, to really be able to do the marketing piece of it, to do kind of the marketing under one umbrella. So tobacco farming, like they didn't want to go to a farmer's market. They were farmers, so they wouldn't have to talk to people, right? That was like the whole point, to be out on the farm. So they weren't used to doing that marketing. So it required kind of that investment in sort of having this intermediary, this food hub, to be able to take on some of that. And again, to really think about, the cycles are different in terms of, when you're planting, when you're harvesting, and trying to have different crops at different times. The application of pesticides and fertilizers are very different than in tobacco. So it's a very different, and the marketing is very different. So it's really different, which is why we had these tobacco foundations that were established to fund that transition. Absolutely.
And someone think about what your next question is.
No, I just wanted, I don't know who asked the question, but I just wanted to say that, and I'm sure Dara has a bunch of info on it, but I was going to just mention Appalachian Sustainable Development, because they've been in business for, well, certainly 15 plus, what's that? Not ASAP, but, Anthony, the one that Anthony Flacavano founded, and like Robin is in charge of in Southwest Virginia. But they were founded with the Tobacco Foundation money, or, settlement money. And they basically started to teach former tobacco growers how to grow organically, how to grow vegetables organically. As you might imagine, that was not always an easy task, but they have been in business, it's gotta be 15 years, maybe 20. We have some case study literature that I can share with you about stuff we did years ago, but it's actually very interesting to see how they have sort of, reconfigured their model over time. So I'm just thinking it's another example of an output. It may not be the answer, but it's certainly one that people have used. It's similar to what Dara just mentioned.
Who's next? Got Don here in the front.
Thank you. I was going to ask Dave, I enjoyed what you had to say. I consider you somewhat of an anomaly in rural ag bankers. Do you ever have these discussions amongst yourselves when you're at Community Banker Foundation events? How do we take your progressive approach out into mainstream ag banking in Kansas?
I'm really non-traditional, and I know that. I like it. I don't enjoy going to bank conventions. I'm sorry. Okay. Sure, I go to a few meetings, but I'd really rather sit around and talk to peers. But what I've really learned over my 36 years of what I call small town community banking is you just got to take care of your community and your services. And I know we donate a lot of money in the communities that we live and work in. And it's like, sometimes somebody will say, like, why would you do that? And I'm like, as a bank, we're no better than our community. So if we have a really lousy community, then it's going to be pretty hard for me to say we got a really great bank. So we want to have a great bank, and we want to be in a great community. And so we just think everything that we do is an investment. And in fact, every donation we make is an investment. We try to do all of our donations. We try to keep them as local as possible. So we probably don't do national donations, if that makes sense. But we try to get all of our money to working back in our communities, helping our people, so to speak. It is non-traditional, and that's probably why we've had so much success, I think. I came here, 23, 25 years ago, very small, very independent, could have been put out of business pretty easily. But I think our success is the fact that we just do one transaction at a time, and people do matter. And a lot of people in our industry just are looking for bigger deals than what we're probably starting out with. But anyway, I still love what I do. I'm 58 years old. I've been doing this 36 years. I get up every morning. I can't wait to go to work and see what we can do today. And I do have 2 children back in the business, 2 out of 3. The one who couldn't make it, she's a dentist. But but the bottom line, we're just trying to hire and retain great people, and it's all about people, and it's all about really, again, it's just your community. I'm really big on the community that you work in, and to me, you should support your community.
Thanks.
Thank you for the question.
Another question in the room, maybe on this side. Who on this side is curious, wanting to dig in? Yes, okay. I see one and then another, so we'll do both.
You're making her exercise before lunch.
It's great getting on my steps, as they say.
thank you all for being on the panel. It was a great conversation. We see a lot in the northwest part of Kansas, where I'm from, of some efforts that are really gaining a lot of momentum. We've got growers that are wanting to expand. We've got growers that are wanting to get into new markets, maybe even niche markets. And we've got co-ops that are doing some really great things that I think are just getting ready to expand and to do some additional services which will help everybody along as well. But I think what Dr. Berger said earlier is very true. We've got all these things that are wanting to happen in the region, and we have all the studies, we have all the information out there for different reasons. We've never been able to really hone that into a direction that will help the producers, more like a system, of producers to the market, into some sort of a operation to get the product moved into the consumers. Distribution is an issue for rural grocery stores. Rural grocery stores, quite frankly, are going to Walmart to shop because they can't get distributors to get them the product. I mean, there's a very serious problem with that, and part of it is population. Part of it is just not having everything cohesive together. I don't know if any of you would like to speak to that on some experiences you've had to hone all that into a really robust system. I'd be interested to hear that.
I'll just be real quick, and we have just from our thing on our farm, we try to emphasize selling our farm products as locally as possible, because I believe that the local food movement has vastly undervalued rural America as a market. And I come from a small town of 3,200, and we have a farmer's market there, and we have farmers who were taking produce to the city, you know, and when you can sell it in your backyard, you don't have as much costs incurred, so you can sell it for a lower price. That's not the answer to everything, but that's a big factor. And you mentioned the grocery stores. There's a lot of these things that what really bothers me is when people want to raise produce for a direct market, they immediately think city, where's my biggest urban population? And there's so many innovative ways that we can sell within our community that I think we've overlooked it now. That's not the end all and be all. Like they said, there's export, there's e-commerce. Some things fit some people, some things don't. We've definitely tried to stay away from some of those because it didn't fit our farm mission, but I think we definitely undervalue our neighbors as our markets.
One of the beauties of the mobile market is we have the capability of bringing those pieces together. The producer, which we're always looking for new producers on our network, the distributor, and the end customer. My feeling is that if we begin to look at the systems that are in place and begin to erase the lines of division, if I do what I do well, then and if you have a resource that you can connect to what I do well, then we should put those resources together and make it work. What has to happen is, one, we've got to build relationships, but two, we've got to put boots on the ground. You've got to be in the communities building relationships to get the services to those people that need it. So the mobile market is in those communities, and we're building those relationships. And I think with us sitting at the table like we're doing today, it's bringing us closer and closer together. I really believe that, because I've been to meeting after meeting after meeting, and we've done the focus groups and the walls, the paper on the walls, and I'm looking at, we just did this. However, it is a process, and people have to process what is happening in our communities. The need is even greater in our food insecurity and food desert areas. And when I can walk up to a county commissioner and he doesn't know what a food desert is in my area, then we've got to go to the drawing board and we've got to educate those that are in positions of power to help us regulate and to move the food. So it's about education and it's about building relationships. And I think as we put those two things together, and our end result is getting the resources to the customer. We have to get the resources to the customer. So if I think of when we begin, and we're beginning to put those things together, I think we'll begin to tap into those. We'll begin to see significant progress. And the mobile market has seen significant progress in the 5 years that we've been doing what we do. We don't advertise. I had a lady from Halstead call me the other day and said, can you put us on the schedule? And I'm looking at this schedule like, oh, I got to think about it. There is a grocery store in Heston, Kansas that closed. So we have been previously serving the senior center. So now they want to know if we can serve the senior center more, if we can do more visits, or we can increase the length of our visit. So those types of things that we know about, as we know about those, the issues that come into us, then it's up to us, the people that are researching and getting the grants and doing all of this, up to us that are pushing the paper to get with those of us that are in the community and to get this going. And when people see us working together, then that's going to make the greatest difference.
Okay, I know we have another.
Grow food if our environment isn't going to sustain it. What are we doing to adjust to the environmental degradation around you with like CAFOs and dropping, cow stuff into the waters, or just the cutting down of trees? What are you all doing to help the environment survive the degradation that's occurring right now?
Well, for us on our farm, which hasn't changed much since our parents acquired in 1968, no herbicides, no pesticides. We're very careful about our food handling processes. And we like to be, my brother does the planting, so he is organic. So he knows all of that, and he tells us you can't do this, you can't do this. So he keeps an eye on how we are planting, how are we harvesting, and how we are caring for the land. So we leave that up to him, and he keeps us pretty well centered on that. We don't want to destroy our legacy, and we don't want to destroy the land. So it's important that we're not doing things that harm it. So anyway, he keeps track of that. I keep track of the market. He keeps track of all of that other stuff. So we do our best.
For us, it's kind of what Donna said. We're in this as a family. We know that it's not just for us, so that's part of our goals, is to be able to take care of what we have, so there's something for folks who come after us. That helps drive our decisions on our farm. How our relationship with our neighbors. I mean, we've kind of historically been, if we're not causing the neighbors to talk about us, then we probably are getting lazy. So we've definitely been unusual in our practices in our community, and we've tried very hard not to alienate our neighbors. But one thing that we've really found, practices that we believe in that need to change. Sometimes farmers and neighbors are not necessarily doing anything to harm their environment intentionally. Sometimes they don't feel like they have choices, and sometimes it's out of ignorance. But especially in today's high capitalist farming economies where they have a lot tied up. What we found, like when we started the non-GMO feed mill, suddenly farmers, the biggest, highest chemical users in the surrounding 5 counties around me, were approaching me and say, I want to grow some non-GMO, but I didn't have anywhere to sell it. And if you guys are going to be able to buy this or sell this for me, they said, I will raise this. And that put a big burden on us too, to realize that we had the power to help our neighbors change. And then there's also the thing, back to the non-adversarial, the latest thing. And I probably shouldn't go public with this, but but we actually did this last year. So it's kind of, if you can't, we don't want to fight them, and we want to join them and help influence them. And so this last year, we actually have become licensed to spray Roundup. And that shows that we are the resident experts. And so then we can educate the customers on how the misapplication and the misuse of that chemical is making some problems on their farm worse instead of better. And then we can come in as the expert with other solutions that would work as well or better at a less negative future consequence to their farm and family. So that's some of the strategies that we've employed. But
Well, I don't have a golf game, so my passion is planting trees. So I do plant 100 to 200 trees every year and have for the last 15 years. We have 400 acres, and I typically plant 100, 150 every year. Just so if you see farms with trees around the parameter, that'd be mine. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I guess I want to echo Rosanna's sort of non-adversarial approach. I think for us in Extension, we feel like it's really important to recognize that farmers of all scales and types are our stakeholders, and they're often our traditional stakeholders, and we don't want to alienate anyone. We want to make sure that everyone feels like they're part of the conversation. We really see our role as being educators. So we want to make sure that people have the research and the information that they need to make informed decisions, both on the producer end and on the consumer end of things. That being said, we do have, as I mentioned, the Center for Environmental Farming Systems. CEFS has this research farm that has been going for 25 years, doing research on what sustainable agricultural farming systems look like over the long term. And part of that is to develop systems and models and information that give producers who feel like they might not have choices, to give them choices, to show them the research in that area so that they don't have to take risks on their own farm. That being said, I think it's really complicated. I think some of the things we're seeing there, is, and the number side isn't your side, the science side isn't necessarily my side, I'm a social scientist, but I think it's, so it's no-till, which is a big conservation practice, also has higher, is it nitrous oxide, is that right, emissions? So this so there's this trade-off, sustainability isn't sort of like the recipe of like, here's the right answer and here's what you do. There are all these trade-offs and it's really complicated, and I think that's why we need to approach it as, we're providing information. And as I mentioned earlier, it's, we've got counties where, Smithfield Farms, the big CAFOs, which were just in the news around, communities suing them, it's a complicated landscape, and I think we just want to make sure that we're not creating enemies where we don't need to, and that we want to try to, as much as possible, bring communities together around the table to talk about what they want their food systems to look like, and use that as a starting point for kind of moving outwards.
That's great. Well, thank you all very, very much. I think I've kept you 5 minutes over, so.